Today we're going to talk about something you've probably heard before, the idea that reheating certain foods might increase cancer risk. I want to be completely upfront with you right from the start. The relationship between reheated foods and cancer is much more complicated than scary headlines suggest, and the actual evidence is a lot less alarming than you might think. What we're really talking about here is how cooking and reheating methods can create certain compounds in food, and how those compounds might, in some cases, theoretically affect cancer risk. But here's what's important. The evidence is mostly from laboratory studies and animal research, not from clear demonstrations that people who reheat specific foods actually develop more cancer. So let's spend the next 15 minutes or so looking at what the science actually shows, what we know, what we don't know, and what practical steps make sense based on the current evidence. Before we dive in, I want to be clear that this is educational content. It's not medical advice, and it doesn't replace talking to your healthcare provider. Everyone's situation is different, so discuss any health concerns or dietary changes with your doctor, especially if you have existing conditions or a family history of cancer. Let me start by explaining what happens when we cook and reheat food, because understanding the basic chemistry helps make sense of the concerns. When you heat food, especially at high temperatures, chemical reactions occur. Proteins, sugars, and fats can break down and recombine in different ways. Some of these reactions create compounds that give food its appealing flavors and colors. Think about the golden brown crust on toast or the caramelization on roasted vegetables. Those are chemical reactions happening. But some of these reactions can also create compounds that, in laboratory conditions or when given to animals in very high doses, have shown potential to damage DNA or cause other cellular changes that could theoretically contribute to cancer development over time. Now, here's where it gets nuanced. Our bodies are constantly exposed to thousands of compounds every day, and we have sophisticated systems for processing and eliminating most of them. The question isn't really whether a compound can cause problems in a petri dish or when you feed massive amounts to mice. The question is whether the amounts people actually consume in real-world eating patterns make a meaningful difference to cancer risk. And that's a much harder question to answer, because cancer develops over decades, involves multiple factors, and varies tremendously from person to person based on genetics, overall diet, lifestyle, and dozens of other variables. Let's talk about the specific foods that often come up in these discussions. The 5 foods most commonly mentioned are rice, chicken, potatoes, mushrooms, and spinach. Each of these has different concerns associated with it, and the level of evidence varies quite a bit. Understanding what we're actually dealing with helps you make informed decisions rather than avoiding foods based on fear. Starting with rice, the concern here isn't actually about cancer-causing compounds from reheating. Instead, it's about a bacteria called Bacillus cereus. This bacteria can survive the initial cooking process and then multiply rapidly if rice is left at room temperature. When rice is then reheated, especially if it isn't heated thoroughly enough, the bacteria can cause food poisoning. Now, food poisoning is certainly unpleasant and can be serious, particularly for older adults whose immune systems may not respond as robustly. But it's not cancer. The way to handle this is straightforward. Refrigerate cooked rice within an hour of cooking, store it for no more than 1 day, and when you reheat it, make sure it's steaming hot all the way through. If you follow those guidelines, reheated rice is perfectly safe. There's no credible evidence linking properly stored and reheated rice to cancer risk. When we talk about chicken, the concern shifts to something called heterocyclic amines, often abbreviated as HCAs. These compounds form when muscle meats, including chicken, beef, pork, and fish, are cooked at high temperatures, particularly through frying, grilling, or barbecuing. A study published in the journal Cancer Epidemiology, Biomarkers and Prevention in 2017 looked at the relationship between cooking methods and cancer risk. The researchers found that people who frequently consumed well-done or charred meats had modestly higher rates of certain cancers compared to people who consumed meats cooked at lower temperatures. But here's what's important to understand about this finding. First, the effect size was relatively small. We're not talking about a doubling or tripling of risk. We're talking about increases in the range of 10 to 20%, and that's comparing people who ate charred meat very frequently to those who rarely did. Second, this is observational research, which means the scientists observed what people ate and what happened to them, but they didn't control all the other variables. People who frequently eat charred meat might also have other dietary or lifestyle factors that contribute to cancer risk. Third, and this is crucial for our topic today, the issue is the high-temperature cooking method itself, not specifically the reheating. If you grill chicken until it's charred, HCAs form during that initial cooking. Gently reheating already cooked chicken in a microwave or oven at moderate temperature doesn't create significant additional HCAs. The practical takeaway here is about cooking methods in general, not about avoiding reheated chicken. When you cook chicken or any meat, using methods that don't char or heavily brown, the surface reduces HCA formation. Baking, poaching, stewing, and steaming all produce much lower levels of these compounds. If you do grill or pan fry, marinating the meat first appears to reduce HCA formation, possibly because the acidic ingredients or antioxidants in marinades provide some protection. Research published in the Journal of Food Science in 2018 showed that marinating chicken in mixtures containing herbs like rosemary, thyme, or garlic reduced HCA formation by 40 to 70%. When you reheat chicken that was cooked using gentle methods, you're not creating a new cancer risk, you're simply warming up food. The key is to reheat it to a safe internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent bacterial growth, but you don't need to cook it at extremely high heat. Potatoes come up in these discussions because of acrylamide, a compound that forms when starchy foods are cooked at high temperatures, especially through frying or roasting. Acrylamide has been classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a probable human carcinogen based on animal studies. When rats and mice are given very high doses of acrylamide, much higher than humans would typically consume, they develop more tumors. But here's where the human evidence gets complicated. Multiple large epidemiological studies, including one published in the British Journal of Cancer in 2014 that followed over 60,000 adults for more than a decade, have not found clear associations between dietary acrylamide intake and increased cancer risk in humans. A more recent meta-analysis from 2020, which combined data from multiple studies, found inconsistent results. Some studies suggested a possible small increase in risk for certain cancers like ovarian or endometrial cancer, but others found no association at all. So what does this mean for potatoes specifically, and for reheating them? Acrylamide forms when potatoes are cooked at temperatures above 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and it forms more when they're cooked longer and turn darker. French fries and potato chips have relatively high levels. Boiled or microwaved potatoes have very low levels. When you reheat potatoes, you're generally doing so at moderate temperatures, and you're not creating significant new acrylamide. The potato has already been cooked, you're just warming it up. The bigger issue, if you're concerned about acrylamide, is the initial cooking method. Boiling, steaming, or microwaving potatoes produces minimal acrylamide. If you do roast or fry them, aiming for a golden color rather than dark brown reduces acrylamide formation. And honestly, given the unclear evidence in humans and the fact that many other factors have much stronger associations with cancer risk, like smoking or obesity, it doesn't make sense to avoid potatoes or reheated potatoes based on acrylamide concerns alone. Mushrooms and spinach often appear together in these discussions because they both contain nitrates, and there's a theory that when nitrate-rich foods are reheated, the nitrates can convert to nitrites and then potentially to nitrosamines, which are compounds that have been linked to cancer in animal studies. Let me walk you through what we actually know about this. Nitrates themselves are not carcinogenic. They're naturally present in many vegetables, and your body actually produces nitrates as part of normal metabolism. In fact, nitrates from vegetables can convert to nitric oxide, which has beneficial effects on blood vessel function and blood pressure. A study published in Circulation Research in 2019 found that people who consumed more nitrate-rich vegetables had lower blood pressure and reduced cardiovascular risk. The concern arises when nitrates convert to nitrites and then to nitrosamines, particularly N-nitroso compounds, which can damage DNA. But here's the key context. This conversion depends on several factors. It requires specific conditions, including the presence of proteins, high heat, and acidic environments. Simply reheating spinach or mushrooms in a microwave doesn't automatically create harmful levels of nitrosamines. Research published in Food Chemistry in 2016 examined nitrate and nitrite levels in various vegetables before and after reheating. The researchers found that while some conversion of nitrates to nitrites did occur, the levels remained well within safe limits established by food safety organizations. Moreover, vegetables also contain vitamin C and other antioxidants that inhibit the formation of nitrosamines. The European Food Safety Authority has stated that the levels of nitrates and nitrites from vegetable consumption, including reheated vegetables, do not pose a significant health risk and may actually provide health benefits. So the idea that you shouldn't reheat spinach or mushrooms doesn't hold up well under scrutiny. What matters more is overall dietary pattern. If you're eating a variety of vegetables, getting plenty of vitamin C from fruits and vegetables, and not combining high nitrate foods with excessive amounts of processed meats that contain added nitrites, your exposure to potentially harmful nitrosamines is minimal. Now, let's step back and look at the bigger picture, because I think that's what really matters here. When we talk about cancer risk, we need to keep things in perspective. Cancer is a complex disease that develops over many years or decades. It involves genetic factors, environmental exposures, lifestyle choices, and often just bad luck at the cellular level. The established risk factors that we know make a real difference include tobacco use, which is linked to about 30% of all cancer deaths, obesity, which is associated with increased risk of at least 13 different types of cancer, excessive alcohol consumption, lack of physical activity, and diets low in fruits and vegetables and high in processed meats. A comprehensive review published in The Lancet in 2020 looked at the proportion of cancer cases that could be attributed to various modifiable risk factors. Tobacco accounted for the largest proportion, followed by obesity, alcohol, and dietary factors as a group. When researchers have tried to estimate the cancer risk from specific compounds like acrylamide or heterocyclic amines in typical dietary amounts, the estimated risk is quite small, often less than a 1% increase. Compare that to smoking, which increases lung cancer risk by about 2,000%, or obesity, which increases the risk of several cancers by 50 to 200%. I'm not saying this to dismiss concerns about food preparation methods. I'm saying it to help you prioritize where to put your energy. If you're worried about cancer risk, the most impactful things you can do are to avoid tobacco in any form, maintain a healthy weight through balanced eating and regular physical activity, limit alcohol to moderate amounts or avoid it altogether, eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, which provide protective compounds, limit processed meats like bacon and sausage, which have stronger evidence linking them to colorectal cancer, and stay up to date with recommended cancer screenings for your age and risk factors. In that context, being thoughtful about how you cook and reheat food is a reasonable part of an overall healthy approach, but it shouldn't become a source of anxiety or lead you to avoid nutritious foods. So, what are the practical recommendations that make sense based on what we know? First, store cooked food safely. This is really about food safety more than cancer risk, but it matters. Refrigerate leftovers within 2 hours of cooking, or within 1 hour if it's a hot day. Store them in shallow containers so they cool quickly and evenly. Use refrigerated leftovers within 3 to 4 days for most foods. When you reheat food, do it thoroughly. The goal is to reach an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, which kills most harmful bacteria. Use a food thermometer if you're unsure. Microwave reheating is actually quite good for this purpose because it heats food relatively evenly without creating the high surface temperatures that can form problematic compounds. Just make sure to stir food partway through if you're reheating something like soup or casserole so it heats evenly. For cooking methods in general, vary them. Sometimes roast vegetables, sometimes steam them, sometimes sauté them. Different methods create different flavor profiles and different nutritional outcomes. There's no need to avoid roasting or grilling altogether. Just aim for golden or lightly browned rather than heavily charred. When you do grill or fry meats, use marinades, especially ones with herbs, citrus, or vinegar. These reduce the formation of heterocyclic amines. Trim visible fat from meat before cooking, because fat dripping onto heat sources creates smoke that can deposit problematic compounds on food. If you're making starchy foods like potatoes, don't store raw potatoes in the refrigerator, because cold storage increases the sugars that contribute to acrylamide formation when cooked. Instead, store them in a cool, dark place. When cooking potatoes, soaking cut pieces in water for 15 to 30 minutes before cooking can reduce acrylamide formation by up to 40%, according to research in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry. Include plenty of fruits and vegetables in your overall diet. They provide fiber, vitamins, minerals, and protective compounds that support your body's natural defense and repair systems. The American Institute for Cancer Research recommends filling at least 2/3 of your plate with vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans. This pattern has consistently been associated with lower cancer risk across multiple studies. And here's something important. Don't let concerns about reheating prevent you from eating vegetables. The benefits of eating spinach, mushrooms, and other vegetables far outweigh any theoretical risks from reheating them. A study published in the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health in 2014 found that people who ate 7 or more portions of fruits and vegetables per day had a 42% lower risk of death from all causes compared to those who ate less than 1 portion per day. Those benefits don't disappear because you reheated the vegetables. Let me address one more thing that sometimes causes confusion. You might see articles talking about never reheating certain foods, and they often mix together food safety issues like bacterial growth with concerns about chemical compounds. These are different issues requiring different solutions. Bacterial growth is a real and immediate food safety concern that you manage through proper storage and thorough reheating. Chemical compounds that might theoretically increase cancer risk over a lifetime are a different category of concern, one where the evidence is less clear and the risk, if it exists at all, is much smaller and operates over a much longer time frame. It's worth being thoughtful about both, but they shouldn't be confused with each other. When should you actually worry? If you're experiencing any symptoms that concern you, don't wait. Unexplained weight loss, persistent changes in bowel habits, blood in your stool, difficulty swallowing, persistent indigestion or heartburn, unusual fatigue that doesn't improve with rest, or any other symptoms that are new and persistent warrant a conversation with your doctor. These symptoms don't mean you have cancer. Most of the time, they have benign explanations, but they deserve medical evaluation rather than self-diagnosis or worry. If you have a family history of cancer, particularly if multiple relatives developed cancer at younger ages, talk to your doctor about whether you need more frequent screening or genetic counseling. If you're making significant dietary changes for any reason and you have existing health conditions or take medications, it's worth discussing with your healthcare provider to make sure the changes are appropriate for your situation. Let me bring this all together for you. The idea that reheating specific foods significantly increases cancer risk is not well supported by the evidence we have. What we know is that certain cooking methods, particularly those that involve very high heat and result in charring or heavy browning, can create compounds that in laboratory or animal studies have shown potential to contribute to cancer development. But the human evidence is limited and inconsistent, and when effects are found, they're generally small. Reheating food using moderate temperatures, which is what most of us do when we warm up leftovers, doesn't create significant amounts of these compounds. The main concern with leftovers is food safety, making sure they're stored properly and reheated thoroughly to prevent bacterial illness. If you want to take a thoughtful approach to reducing any potential risks from how you prepare food, focus on varying your cooking methods, avoiding heavily charred or burnt food, using marinades when grilling or frying, including plenty of fruits and vegetables in your diet, and maintaining the healthy lifestyle factors that we know make a real difference in cancer risk. Don't let fear of reheated foods prevent you from eating nutritious meals or make you waste food unnecessarily. The stress of worrying about every detail of food preparation probably does more harm than the theoretical risks from reheating vegetables or chicken. Remember that your overall dietary pattern matters much more than any single food or cooking method. A diet rich in plant foods, with moderate amounts of lean protein, whole grains, and healthy fats, prepared using a variety of methods, is what the evidence supports for reducing chronic disease risk, including cancer. Individual variation is real. What works for one person might not work exactly the same way for another. Pay attention to how you feel, trust your body's signals, and make adjustments based on your own experience and your healthcare provider's guidance. If you found this information helpful, subscribing to this channel helps me continue making evidence-based health content for adults over 50. Sharing this video with someone who might benefit from it helps spread accurate information instead of fear-based headlines. If you have questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future videos, leave them in the comments. I do read them and I try to address common questions in upcoming content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.